on YouTube and channel 15. So welcome to the April 14th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Yeah, the days of this week are just flying by. This meeting is being conducted consistent with Assembly Bill 361 or Government Code Section 54953E. The Planning Commission meeting includes teleconferencing participation by all members. We are conducting the meeting using the Zoom platform, streaming live on the city website and broadcasting on Comcast Channel 15, as well as via the city YouTube channel. Public members had the opportunity to submit emails to city staff. A report of all written comments was distributed to planning commissioners via email and posted to the city's website under documents received after published agenda. Ms. Chan, would you please take roll call?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ali Sullivan, absent. Commissioner Bonilla.
Present. Thank you.
Commissioner Goldstein.
Present.
Commissioner Lowe.
Present.
Commissioner Roche.
I did get a message from Commissioner Roche. She will not be here tonight.
Commissioner Roche is absent. Commissioner Stevens.
Present.
Chair Okenda.
Present.
And thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. I think first order of business here is to jump into public comment on items not on the agenda. Do we have anybody who's attending who wants to speak on an item not on the agenda? If so, please raise your hand and Ms. Chan will be able to help you out here. Do you mind moderating that, Ms. Chan? See if anybody raises their hand.
Hi, Chair.
Yes.
Here the people are staff and we're trying to promote them right now. Okay. Andre Van Horn. Okay, I guess he's a member of the public. Let's see. Yes. So as a member of the public, if you wish to speak and you're using the Zoom application, please click the raise hand function and your name will be called. If you're dialing in, press *9 to raise your hand and press *6 to unmute yourself when called to speak. Please mute all other audio before speaking. When called to speak, please begin by stating your name and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Okay, so nobody has raised their hand, Chair.
Okay, well, with that, we will close public comment on items not on the agenda. And we will move on to the first agenda item, which is the capital improvement program. And before we do that, I see Commissioner Stevens. Do you have a question or comment?
Chair, I'm going to need to excuse myself from this item because there's a potential conflict of interest for me on this. So I'm going to go on mute and I'm going to turn myself off here.
Okay. Thank you. That's...
I'm sorry, Chair, who was that speaking?
That was Commissioner Stevens, who is recusing himself from this item.
All right, thank you. So he's leaving the room.
He is leaving the room. Commissioner Stevens, can I ask staff, does he have to log off Zoom in this instance, or is it okay for him to stay just not participating?
Well, usually then if we were in chambers, they would leave the chambers. So of course, staff were City Attorney Bahia. What would you recommend that Commissioner Stevens do?
I think out of an abundance of caution, if he could log off and just log on maybe. Or if it's more expedient for him to just mute and turn off his video and just, we'll just acknowledge that he'll leave the room. Then maybe we can do it that way. I don't know what technologically, I'm not really sure what the most efficient way is to do it. But if he's not going to participate, maybe just muting and turning off his camera. That's probably fine.
Okay. Well,
he won't be participating. So sure. As long as there's some function where he's not going to participate.
Okay. That was Commissioner Stevens' suggestion. I just wanted to make sure that was kosher with staff. So we shall do that. Thank you very much for the feedback. Okay. So we are hearing now the first item on the agenda, which is an item that we can make a recommendation on to the City Council. It is a recommendation about the fiscal year 2023 to fiscal year 2032 capital improvement program. And I believe staff has a report.
Right. Yes. Thank you and good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Staff is pleased to be here to present the city's FY23, FY32 capital improvement program. This is a public hearing. The development of the CIP has been a process involving many staff over the past months. Public Works and Utilities team have been led by Ellie Lowe and Kate Byrne and included Manny Grawal and Trang Nguyen. As always, finance department staff and engineers and other staff in various divisions have been involved in and contributed to the process. Some of them are here this evening to help respond to questions. Staff recommends that the Commission finds the FY23, FY32 CIP is consistent with the city's 2040 general plan and recommends its approval to Council. Now I turn this over to Kate Byrne, Acting Senior Management Analyst, to present the staff report. Kate?
I apologize, I was having trouble unmuting myself, so let me try resharing my screen now. All right, so thank you, Alex, so much for that brief introduction. I would first like to start this presentation off by mentioning that this is the second year that the CIP has been developed in the online OpenGov Stories format. This year's book includes several updates and improvements that I'd like to draw your attention to. And so now I'm going to be opening up the online book to point out some of these improvements, as well as provide a quick refresher on how to navigate the book. So one moment while I transition my screen once more. All right. Can everyone see my browser?
Yes.
Excellent. So as you can see here, this is where the capital improvement program lives on the City of Hayward's website. It's at hayward-ca.gov/CIP. And like last year, we've prepared this button that takes you directly to the new online version. This is the platform in which we recommend viewing the CIP because it includes a number of interactable tables and charts. However, for those who need to print the CIP or download it for any reason, this printable PDF version has also been prepared. So with that, I am now going to take us into the online platform. And that takes us to our homepage. So down just beneath the cover image, just like last year, the CIP has been separated into 4 major categories. We have our introduction category, our strategic priorities category, our explore the budget category, and our table of contents. First, I'm just going to briefly click on this table of contents. Again, just like last year, this table of contents is prepared to help viewers of the CIP quickly navigate to whatever specific aspect of the CIP they're looking for. So it includes links to just about every single page in the CIP, and links to this table of contents are included in the footer of every single page of the online book. So you can never lose it. So now hopping back to our intro page, there are some improvements that we made to the strategic priorities section this year. So I just want to draw your attention to those. So again, like last year, we provided an overview of the council adopted strategic roadmap and priorities. This graphic does include the currently adopted titles of those council approved priorities. Later this month, council is actually going to be considering some revised priority titles. So this graphic may be changing when we prepare the book for adoption. But at this point, these are the currently adopted priorities. And beneath this graphic, viewers of the CIP will find brief project update narratives for some of our highlighted strategic roadmap projects, as well as hyperlinks to pages with more details about their budget. And I'm not going to scroll through all of these because there's quite a few of them, but I am going to take you down just a few rows to the section of this page that we've dedicated to shedding some additional light on all of our traffic calming projects. To just provide a little more insight into those, this year we pulled together a table that features all of the various traffic calming projects and their proposed budgets. And we've included some project narratives to accompany some of those highlighted traffic calming projects. So now I'm going to back up and take you to the Explore the Budget page. This is the page where all of the key budget insights live. For instance, you'll notice that this year's fiscal year 23 budget includes a proposed amount of $118 million, while the 10-year proposed budget is about $634 million. Some other key insights, such as the proposed general fund transfers and ISF, are included on this page, as are the unfunded capital needs. And beneath that, again, like last year, we've divided the budget into a by fund view or a by category view. Now, I'm going to take you to the by category view for just a moment. So I'm going to scroll down slightly to this table here. This year, we implemented a more comprehensive subcategorization process for our CIP projects. Previously, we just had these 8 or so major categories that we put the CIP projects in. This year, we've also introduced subcategories so that if a viewer of the CIP were to look at one of these categories, they could at a glance see the types of projects that are being funded within each category. And then they could, of course, drill down to the specific projects if they desired to do that. And if they scrolled a little further down, they could click on any of these hyperlinked major categories to see even further detail. Now, backing up one more time, I also want to point something quickly out in our by fund budget view. So again, thanks to this more comprehensive subcategorization that we've implemented, you can now see at a glance a little more easily the types of projects that each fund is funding. So if I scroll down to Fund 406, for instance, last year, this chart would have featured just a list of every single project in the fund. This year, thanks to that subcategorization, you can easily see the types of projects that are being funded by this fund. And then once again, you can drill down to the specific projects if you desire to do so. So with that, there are just 2 more things that I want to point out in this year's CIP. Again, I'm on the main Explore the Budget page. This year, we have also introduced 2 new appendices. And this is for those CIP viewers who want to find a very specific CIP project, but don't want to have to click around to look for it. We've introduced this all project budgets by category page so that viewers of the CIP who want to find a certain project but aren't sure what category to look in can simply reference this resource. So when I click on this, again, viewers can use just the Control F or Command F function to search by keyword or project number. For instance, if I were to search fire station, it would pull up all of the projects with a fire station keyword. I could see their 10-year budgets. If I scroll to the right or left, I could see it's in the fire facilities subcategory. And if I scroll up, I can see that it's in the municipal facility improvements overarching category. And now just to walk you through Appendix B, this is the all project descriptions by fund appendix. And in this table, the functionality exists so that a viewer could search by project number or by keyword, depending on the column they're searching in, for whatever project they're looking for. And for instance, I just looked up the new fire training center project, and this will pull up a project description for the project. You can either scroll to the right to read the entire description, or you can click on the description and a little pop-up comes up with the entire description for easier viewing. So that concludes my very brief refresh / overview of the updates of the online CIP book. I am now going to transition my screen back to the core presentation.
I was just following along with you on that on my own screen and clicking around, and I find it very useful. And the changes and updates you all have made are amazing. So thank you for sharing that again.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. Can you see my full screen presentation?
Yep.
Excellent. So as I mentioned during that very quick tour, the proposed CIP includes a total recommended budget of approximately $118 million in fiscal year 23, and the total budget of approximately $634 million in the entire 10-year planning period from fiscal year 23 to 32. The document also includes a proposed general fund transfer of approximately $3.9 million in fiscal year 23, which is about a $1.4 million reduction from last year. The proposed CIP also includes internal service fees, which are fees that are collected when one city department provides a service to another, drawing those service expenses from the operating budget of the benefiting department. The CIP includes recommended ISF of approximately $4.8 million, which is about $1.5 million higher than last year. And this proposed increase is primarily related to restoring transfers to the Fleet Management Capital Fund. Of the $118 million in recommended programming, 3 of the categories which would receive the largest portion of this budget are the livable neighborhoods, sewer, and water system categories. Livable neighborhoods, which is the largest budgeted category, includes parks like La Vista Park and Linear Park, buildings like the Stack Center, median landscaping projects like those in the Tennyson and Jackson corridors, traffic calming projects, pedestrian and bicycle improvements, and sidewalk projects, among others. Further detail about all of the various projects that comprise these categories and their recommended budgets can be found in the full CIP book. And of that same $118 million in recommended programming, the fund with the largest allocation of recommended budget is the General Capital Projects Fund 405, which would receive about $33.5 million per the recommended CIP. This fund supports projects like La Vista Park and the South Hayward Youth and Family Center. The sewer and water system funds are the second and third funds with the largest allocation of recommended budget. They support such major projects as the annual water and sewer line replacements, as well as the water pollution control facility nutrient management projects. I'll now be detailing some of the recommended CIP's major projects and their alignment with the various elements of the Hayward 2040 General Plan. The South Hayward Youth and Family Center, for instance, is aligned with the public facilities and services element. The picture featured here is a rendering from the conceptual design phase of the project, and it has been estimated to require a $35.2 million budget. And of that, about $23.5 million is not yet funded. The WPCF main electrical rehab and nutrient management projects are two other examples of major CIP projects that are aligned with this general plan element. A number of CIP projects are also aligned with the mobility general plan element, including the Mission Boulevard Phase 3 project, the Campus Drive Improvement Project, the Main Street Complete Street project, and the Transportation Equity Plan project. Some other key projects that are aligned with this element include the new pavement and sidewalk projects, as well as the downtown parking plan implementation, Hayward Boulevard feasibility study, and Old Highland Homeowners Association pavement program. A major example of a project aligned with the community safety element is the Fire Station number 6 and Training Center project. Some notable efforts which support the land use general planned element include the Tennyson Corridor and Jackson Corridor beautification projects, and some projects which aligned with the natural resources element include our recycled water project, through which we were officially able to begin delivering recycled water to our approximately 30 Phase 1 customers just last month. La Vista Park is another major project aligned with this element, and the construction documents for the park are currently being prepared, and construction is anticipated to begin in spring 2023. The city's climate action plan has also been adopted as part of the 2040 general plan, and a number of the projects included in the CIP are expressly aligned with it, including our 2 megawatt solar project at the water pollution control facility. Additionally, the fleet division's efforts to transition to greener models when possible supports the city's strategic roadmap priority to transition 15% of our fleet to EVs or hybrids, as do the citywide EV charging strategy upgrade and publicly accessible fast charger projects, which are new projects that have been added to the CIP this year and will be contingent upon receiving funds through a new federal infrastructure bill. In addition to demonstrating the recommended CIP's conformance with the general plan, I would also like to take a brief moment to demonstrate its alignment with the city's strategic roadmap. This slide has been prepared based on the currently adopted strategic roadmap, but it is important to note that the City Council will be considering revised titles and projects for these priorities later this month. The list of projects here is not exhaustive, but it does demonstrate a nice snapshot of the priorities which the CIP projects support. For instance, you can see that the CIP projects tend to directly support the improved infrastructure priority, though they do touch most of the other priorities. Again, this list is not exhaustive, and it is also important to note that many of the projects support multiple priorities simultaneously, even if they are formally listed under one particular priority. That concludes our presentation. Myself and the team are now available for any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I have just a quick kind of technical question about the availability of certain descriptions for projects. Mm-hmm. How can I learn more about a specific traffic calming measure, for example? As you were presenting, I have an interest in the D Street traffic calming study and efforts. And the description, has a couple lines about what the traffic calming, work will hopefully achieve. But I wanted to learn more about what it actually does. What the city's actually doing for that. Where would I go for that information? Not necessarily asking you for the information itself, but where would I go for that?
Sure. So the D Street Traffic Calming Project is actually one of the traffic calming projects we highlight on that strategic roadmap page. So if you head straight to that page, you're going to find a little bit of an expanded narrative about that project.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open it up for public. No, question. We're going to do it's a
public hearing.
Public hearing. So let's go ahead and do public comment first, and then we'll do quick commissioner questions and comments after. So I'm going to open the public comment for this agenda item. We have one attendee that I see. And we're going to open it up for public comment if this is an item they wish to comment on.
Thank you, Chair. If you wish to speak and you're using the Zoom application, please click the raise hand function and your name will be called. Please mute all audio before speaking. When called to speak, please begin by stating your name and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Andre Van Horn, would you like to speak? You can raise your hand at this time. Okay, Chair, Mr. Van Horn, nobody has raised their hand.
Okay. Then seeing no public speaker, no public comment, we'll close public comment and we'll go to commissioner questions and comments. Is there anyone who would like to start us off? Commissioner Bonilla, hello.
Hi there. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was very informative, and I also agree with Chair Okenda, the online format of the CIP is very user-friendly. I also appreciate seeing how a lot of these projects are being done in partnership so that the city doesn't carry the total cost of the project. I saw that like on the Safer Routes project, where ACTC was giving some grant funding that was covering 50% of the project, which I liked. The transportation equity plan is being partially funded by Caltrans, which I like. So I really like the way that this plan reflects the partnerships that we're creating to be able to advance some of these projects in the city. As far as the Stack Center is concerned, I know that the South Hayward Youth and Family Center, I really appreciate that project, but you had talked about there was a portion of it that's unfunded. So what's the plan for that to be funded? Is it just going to be future CIPs or through some sort of partnership? But what's the plan to get that project fully funded?
I can take that. So the city manager's office is actively pursuing funding, looking at different options to get the funding that we need to close the funding gap. And at that point, we can start the construction project. The project is in design right now. And as I said, the city is actively looking for different grants and ideas to raise the funding. Unfortunately, the monies from the federal government are not available for any vertical project, any building project at this time, but there may be other sources that the city is pursuing.
Are they relatively confident that they'll be successful in pursuing those other sources?
I couldn't comment on that right now. I know that they are actively looking for funding.
Got it. Thank you for that. And then same kind of question applies to our police department. I know that we keep pushing off that project and I see it's again on the unfunded list. So I know it's in pretty desperate repair. So what's the plan for that?
So the plan for that is, again, to look for funding and come up with a reasonable project size that the city can afford, and then pursue the design and construction. In the meantime, though, one of the areas that has been in real need of an upgrade at the existing police station is the locker room for male and female staff there. The city is pursuing a design as we speak to do a 5,500 square foot addition to that building for new lockers. And that means that the existing square footage, 2,200 square feet for the male portion and 1,800 for female, can be made available for other uses to relieve some of the need for space that they have there.
Got it. Thank you. That was my last question. I support these projects and what was presented tonight for recommendation. And I also appreciate to see the focus of so many of these projects in the South Hayward area, because, you know, and especially in the category of supporting the quality of life, because that community really deserves it. So thank you very much, Chair Okenda and staff, for the presentation.
Thank you.
Rania. I'll pass it along to Commissioner Lowe. Hello.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you again thank you also for the presentation. I really enjoyed going through the website the other day. I thought it was very user-friendly, and I'm not the most tech-savvy person, and I didn't have any problems navigating it, and that says a lot, trust me. So thank you for that and all your hard work that you put into it. I noticed that you talked about it talks about the trees that the city has planned to plant about 1,000 trees every year. And it also said, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it also said that includes the trees that the developers plant as well. So it's not 1,000 plus whatever the developers plant. It's 1,000 totals, including what the developers plant. So how many are we estimating that the city is actually planting per year? And what are the parameters of that? Are we very strategic about what we are planting? Are we making sure we have some male trees, some female trees? Are we very specific about the types of trees? And can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I can start. Commissioner Lowe, Director Rollman is not here tonight to speak to these, but I can tell you that unofficially, when we talk about the division between city planted trees and developer planted trees, it's about half and half, 500 by city and 500 by private developers. I can tell you from memory that last time when we look at inventory, the number of planted trees was in the 1,300 range. So we had exceeded that amount. And of course, we are going to always want to do more and continue to do more.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Lowe. Commissioner Goldstein.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I'm just amazed actually at this project, because every year when Director Amiri and his team come back to talk to us about the capital improvement project, it just keeps getting easier to navigate and easier to connect the dots. And I think this year's project is at the pinnacle. And I don't know how you're going to outdo yourselves next year, but I am looking forward to seeing what new things you're able to come up with. When I started on the planning task force about 10 years ago, one of the frequent comments that other members talked about was how difficult it was to not just come up with the 2040 plan and its predecessors, but to actually track them in a way that made sense, and that we make these policy decisions, and then through one reason or another, people would tend to lose sight of what those policy decisions and what their intended impacts would be. But through tools like this, the online one, and you know, as difficult as it is to maintain in you know, paper and PDFs, Alex, your team has done a wonderful job of doing that, but putting it online like this really contributes to transparency, and the innovations really help everyone in this community be able to see, understand what the priorities are, why they're there, and how well we are tracking towards completion. And I just really need to give you thanks for, I work in technology, so I know how hard that is. And it's really just an amazing and an outstanding job. So I hope whatever happens next, you always carry that with you. Then in terms of doing our job on Planning Commission, having access to this tool also helps us understand where we are tracking and maybe where we're starting to fall a little short. And Ray brought up the concern about the next police department. And there are not only concerns from the people that have to work there, but also in the community. And community members expect the police to be available when they need them. And sometimes the workspace environment can support that or it can inhibit it. And just based on what I'm hearing from the folks that work there, I think we're at a point where there's an inhibition. And so I'm hoping that City Council will consider that and put in place some plans to move forward with what this community needs. There's many, many other needs. Most of those other needs, it appears that they're being well addressed, but that's one that just seems to me is a little bit of a gap there. So I hope we can put some focus there. The parks, one of the things that I love about Hayward, there's more park space per capita in Hayward than I think any other city in California. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's one of the things that I love about Hayward. This Darren Park, for example, which is close by, is I think 25 square miles of parkland, and that's a regional park. And I am actually including in my calculation the regional parts, not just Hayward Parks and Rec, but it's all cumulative, right? And I'm just ecstatic to see that there's progress being made on the Bella Vista Park. Question about that, though, is you said that construction is scheduled to start in spring of 23. Does that mean that all the budget obligations have been met, or are we still looking to finalize budget for that?
So we are still looking to close the funding gap, but we are going to start on some portion of that project. There is a repair to the geotechnical work that has to get done. We are going to start doing that soon. We are preparing plans and specs for that portion of the project. And again, actively looking to find the funding to close the gap to proceed with the project.
Okay, all right, very good. That's fair enough. And then the 2040 plan items related to safe walking to school. Can you give me an update on that?
Yes, we do projects as we work with ACTC, Alameda County Transportation Commission. Right now, we are working on a project to improve access to Cesar Chavez School. Mm-hmm. And in the future, we have plans for other schools as funding becomes available. That is not the type of funding that is very difficult to get, except that we don't know what funding is going to be available in the next few years. We have to wait, work with ACTC, get the funding, and then implement the projects.
Okay, very good. And then phase 3 of the Mission Boulevard project, is that begun, or are we still thinking that we're in phase 2? What's the... No,
phase 2, which goes from industrial to the southern end of the city, southern boundary of the city, has been completed and in service. That's done. The phase 3 goes from A Street north to north end of the city, which is Rose at the border with Alameda County. That project, we prepared plans and specs, went to bid, received bids, but the low bid was about $5 million over the engineer's estimate. So we are working very hard to close that gap. We have raised about $2.5 million of that funding and working on getting the other $2.5 million, working with ACTC and other entities. And as soon as we have certainty about that, we are ready to go to bids again and construct that segment.
Okay, and then just to be clear for our guests that are listening in, when we talk about the budget availability, we're actually talking about commitments, not necessarily receipt of dollars. Is that correct?
Correct. The $2.5 million that I mentioned that are available to us, they are available to us. They are at hand. The other $2.5 million that we think is going to cost to go to bid again and do the project has not been received, has not been committed. We are looking into it. One option would be to use some of the city's own Measure B and BB funds to be able to complete that project.
So we would use our B and BB funds to complete the project and perhaps get compensated back from some other funding source?
That would be one option, but we are pursuing as we speak to close that gap.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Nicely done. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldstein. So we got the questions and comments done from everybody. I don't have anything to add at this point. Great job, City. I'm definitely in support of the proposed use of the capital improvement program. Commissioner Bonilla, are you wanting to make a motion? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I move to recommend to City Council the approval of the projects listed within the recommended FY 2023 through 2032 capital improvement plan, and also recommending that it's consistent with the Hayward General Plan.
I'll second.
Okay. Ms. Chan, we have a motion to approve the item as staff recommended that finds the capital improvement program is consistent with the Hayward 2040 general plan and recommends that council approve the project list as proposed. Commissioner Goldstein has seconded that motion.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Bonilla?
Yes.
Commissioner Goldstein?
Yes.
Commissioner Lowe?
Yes.
Chair Okenda?
Yes.
There you go.
There you go. All right. We're going to move on.
Chair Okenda, I just want to express my appreciation for the comments that you made and for the recommendation that you made to City Council. Really appreciate your comments and thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mary. Really appreciate your hard work and dedication in serving the community in Hayward.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to the second agenda item, which is a work session item. It's not requiring us to do much of anything, but listen, ask questions, make some comments, and, enjoy. So this is the proposed traffic impact fee and nexus study. We're going to go ahead and get started with a staff presentation before we do anything else.
Real quick here, just as a friendly reminder, Commissioner Stevens can join again.
Oh, yes. I almost forgot about him. Commissioner Stevens, welcome back. Your presence was not lost on us. Maybe just me. This moment, but happy you're back. Okay, now we can start the presentation for this work session item.
Thank you again, and good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm going to start this presentation. I am really excited to be here this evening to present the city's proposed traffic impact fee. A team of city staff and consultants have been working on this project for some time, including Sharman Sola, our senior transportation engineer, and Stephen Chang, associate transportation planner. The team has also received invaluable guidance and contributions from Assistant City Manager Jennifer Ott, who unfortunately could not be here tonight. Paul Nguyen, Economic Development Manager, has also been involved. Development Services staff have provided comments and helpful suggestions. On the consultant side, Community Attributes performed financial feasibility analysis, and Michaela Jellicoe of the firm is here to assist me in this presentation. If we can bring up the presentation. Michaela?
Can you see it?
Yes. Then if you can go to the next one. Yes. So the agenda that we are going to cover tonight is going to go over the goals and purpose, is going to provide an overview and the stakeholder outreach that we have made for this project. We are going to look into the financial feasibility findings for the project. We are going to present to you the staff recommendations, how we compare to other jurisdictions, the feedback that we have received from the stakeholders, and how we are responding to those, the relationship between the traffic impact fee and local transportation analysis that at times are required for the project. And then we are going to go over the next steps and answer any questions that you may have. Next. Thank you. So the goals of the project is to address the impact of growth on city streets on a cumulative basis. So what is the impact of all of the projects that may be coming in the next few years on the city streets? This TIF process is going to streamline city transportation review process. This is an exciting opportunity to reduce some of the timeline that it takes to review the process, and as importantly, bring some certainty to the process. In the process, we want to avoid disincentivizing new development. We are pro-development, pro-housing. We don't want this process to be a barrier to that. To that end, as I mentioned, we have hired community attributes. Michaela Jellicoe is a staff member with that firm. They evaluated financial feasibility and what do we need to do in order to be still comparable to other jurisdictions while we are, implementing our TIF, and as I said, bring the positive impacts that TIF can bring to the process. We want to be very attentive to the economic recovery in some sectors, such as, for instance, retail, restaurants, office, and others that have been impacted by COVID. So we've been very careful about that. Next. So the process overview for TIF includes preparing, this took some time to prepare a multimodal improvement plan and a nexus study that looks at 100 intersections, 15 roadways, important roadways, to provide a maximum allowable fee. What is the maximum amount that the law allows us to set our fees at? Then with that, we had to do and that work, by the way, was done by TJKM, which is a very good consultant in Northern California in the East Bay. The other issue was the feasibility study to make sure that we understand the feasibility of different development groups to absorb and respond to TIF. Again, like I mentioned, jurisdictional comparisons, and then based on all of that, staff recommendation. Transportation analysis, local transportation analysis, as you know, at times can be a long and expensive process. It can take weeks, it can take tens of thousands of dollars to do. This TIF is going to simplify LTA process because LTA doesn't have to then include the areas that have been already included in TIF. So TIF and LTA are going to integrate in order to disincentivize, to avoid disincentivizing new development in the city. And I'll go over that in some detail. Next one. We have had numerous outreach to the stakeholders, starting with a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce to discuss the project and outline for them where we were going. Then we had a Stack Extra. This is our digital newsletter that was sent to 65,000 subscribers discussing what was coming. We sent an email to over 400 developer contacts that we had. We had stakeholder presentation and meeting with them in early February. We had, like I said, LinkedIn. I didn't mention this, that the LinkedIn post that is shared by Economic Development Manager Paul Nguyen goes to 1,400 followers, and that was another tool that we used to get there. And then we had a presentation to the Chamber of Commerce Government Relations Council on March 4th. What we heard from them were some substantive comments related to the TIF, but a lot of comments about the process. They felt that, sending email or sending a newsletter wasn't going to be sufficient, and they suggested that we should have contacted personally these developers in the city. A great comment. They graciously provided 20 plus stakeholder information to us. Staff added another 20 to that. So we had a total of 40 stakeholders that we personally reached out to and asked for a second meeting in order to hear from them and explain the TIF process. Again, we sent emails to the developer contacts that we had and advertising social media. We had second stakeholder presentations and meeting the last day of March. And it was virtual. Next. Okay, I mentioned some of this already. The benefits of traffic impact fee, some may feel that the benefit is mostly financial. That is not the most important part in my view. The increased certainty that this brings to the development process is extremely important. A developer is going to know upfront by looking at the fee schedule, what is their exposure, what is the ballpark that their development, depending on size and what it is going to be responsible for. So they can plan for that fee during the process rather than at the end of the process for us to look at the impact that they create on our streets and come up with a fee or ask for a long and cumbersome LTA process. And as I mentioned, the system-wide transportation improvements, those costs are spread over all of the developments rather than one or two or three that come and happen to be close to an intersection or an impacted roadway. It simplifies the process. LTA process can be complex, can take up to 12 weeks, can cost up to $65,000 based on our experience. But because some of the improvements that are in TIF are excluded, all of them are excluded from the LTA process, that can reduce both cost and the time that it takes to prepare the LTA. Next. Thank you. So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Michaela from Community Attributes to go over the financial feasibility of the development process. Go ahead, Michaela.
Thank you very much. So we at Community Attributes looked at several specific development types or typologies that we worked with the city to identify, ranging between non-residential and residential types that the city either sees regularly or serves as a representative model for the types of development. And we conducted pro forma analysis for each of these prototypes, including market research and, like I said, that pro forma modeling. And we found that the most promising of the typologies is industrial warehouse, supported by very strong regional demand. And Hayward's central location sets it up to capture that demand very effectively. And our modeling shows a positive residual land value, which means that after developer return, there's value remaining to cover the cost of the purchase of land, which is what we look for in feasibility modeling. We also looked at life sciences to differentiate that use a little bit from your spec warehouse types uses. And we found similar strong regional demand for life science type uses. However, we classify this as a possible rather than a promising use type, just because development costs are very high for this type of product, and the rents needed to cover that cost are quite high as well and harder to achieve. We found that both of the residential types that we looked at, single family and multifamily, were both marginal for slightly different reasons. There's very strong regional demand for housing, which I'm sure that we're all aware of. But for single family residential, we're seeing some development in Hayward currently, especially townhome type development, very strong sales prices. But we classify it as marginal because there's also a very high development costs currently, and including both construction and land costs, which can create some challenges and just make that feasibility just a little bit more challenging. Multifamily residential is a little bit different. We're not seeing very much current development in Hayward of multifamily uses. And we're also seeing some pretty significant impacts from the pandemic and ongoing eviction moratoria, including decreased lease rates, stagnating lease rates, and increased vacancy rates and credit loss. But we believe that it's marginal and has promise because of supported by that very strong regional demand for housing. The three remaining uses we found were all challenged. These might be somewhat as expected given current conditions. Retail centers have a relatively uncertain future due to the pandemic, and we found that achievable lease rates aren't supporting new construction. That doesn't to say that all retail is infeasible. There are some situations in which a retail anchor or other situations can make that new retail development more feasible, but it is quite challenged. Restaurants are very similar to retail, but that housing growth might support some incremental additions to inventory. And then lastly, commercial office is seeing quite weak market demand currently. And our analysis found that lease rates generally aren't supporting new construction for office. So with that, staff put together the presented recommendation. You see that we've included the maximum allowable rate from that Nexus study for each of the presented use types. And for single family, we're recommending a 70% reduction below the maximum, so a fee of $3,475. Multifamily, retail, and office, staff is recommending all three of those be waived. And then general industrial and distribution and e-commerce, which are seeing very strong regional demand, we're recommending a 30% reduction on the maximum for rates of $3,243 and $5,757 per 1,000 square feet, respectively. So included in that, so I think I already mentioned the fee reductions and waiving those selected land uses, multifamily, retail, and office. And we're also recommending multiple industrial categories, primarily because of the differences in the intensity of impact for those different types of industrial uses. Included in the recommendation is exemptions for affordable housing consistent with the park and live fee, as well as exemptions for ADUs. And then on the process side, staff is recommending that the TIF be effective July 1st, 2022, if adopted. Applications submitted prior to July 1st will be grandfathered at the current rates. so that those pipeline projects will have the certainty that they currently have, and future projects not in the pipeline will be subject to the new impact fee. We're also recommending including an annual construction inflation adjustment to allow for the TIF to keep pace with construction inflation over time. And because this is a new program, we're also recommending reviewing the rates and program itself after 3 years. Look back and see how it's functioning and how those different recommended rates are working, including the waived rates. Alex, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I just, if I may, I just wanted to mention that reviewing the rates after 3 years doesn't necessarily mean that the rates are going to be adjusted upwards. We are going to take a look at the performance of TIF, what has happened in the economy, what has happened in the city. In some cases, the TIF may be reduced. In some cases, may be kept at the same level and adjusted otherwise. So this is a comprehensive review that we will give to TIF to see how it has performed over the first 3 years. Thank you.
We also put together some fee comparisons. It's really important to understand how, with the implementation of an impact fee, how are you comparing to your neighbors, competing jurisdictions, similar market areas. So we put together some comparisons. You'll see here all the slides that will follow this. They match the feasibility analysis that we conducted. And you'll see that there's the blue bar is the transportation or the traffic impact fee on the very far left. And then all the other colors are different types of impact fees. So this shows the total impact fee load that this type of use could expect. The selection of comparisons includes neighbors, so your immediate surrounding neighbors, as well as some selected similar jurisdictions within the area, and also some that have more recently completed an update to their nexus study to give sort of a complete overview of these competing jurisdictions. And we do know that obviously not all of these jurisdictions have very similar housing markets, but we wanted to provide a sort of comprehensive comparison. So you'll see that we've bolded and boxed in green both the current rate and the recommended rate. So you can see how the inclusion of the traffic impact fee as recommended changes the relative position among these comparison jurisdictions. So you can see currently for a 3-bedroom single-family attached dwelling unit at about 2,000 square feet is third from the bottom among these comparison jurisdictions at a total impact fee of about $55,000, including the traffic impact fee that increases to $58,000. But you'll also see that cities like Fremont and Daly City have higher total impact fees for single-family uses. For a 1-bedroom multifamily unit, we're recommending that fee be waived. So the current and the recommended are the same. You will see that Hayward is near the bottom of the comparison jurisdictions for this type as well. General industrial, you currently have a small park impact fee for industrial uses. And with the recommendation that fee increases by about $800,000 for a 250,000 square foot spec warehouse type use. This puts you at the lower middle of the comparison jurisdictions as recommended. Distribution and e-commerce, to a similar 250,000 square foot facility within the distribution e-commerce is a slightly higher, but similarly still in very, very much in the middle of these comparison jurisdictions. Not every jurisdiction differentiates. So in some cases, for some cities, this might be comparing a sort of general industrial if they don't differentiate between different types of industrial uses in their traffic impact fee programs. Retail, we're recommending that this use be waived as well. So you currently have no impact fees on retail uses, and we're recommending that that remains. So you're at the bottom of these comparison jurisdictions. Similar for office. And those are the comparisons. Alex, do you want to take over?
Yes, thank you, Michaela. In your presentation, you covered a lot of things that I was going to say under the stakeholder feedback, so I go through these more quickly. At the first stakeholder feedback, there was a comment regarding why reduction for single-family rate, should the rate be increased? The response was that while there is, as Michaela mentioned, while there is significant demand for single-family homes, but construction costs and land costs are high, and we still see marginal feasibility for single-family. So we are proposing a reduction, and as I mentioned, we are going to look at all of our fees in the next few years to see if we need to adjust them. There was a comment at that meeting regarding expenditures for alternative modes of transport and not spending all of these fees on streets and road widening. Our response is that the Nexus study basically allocates most of the fees, most of the TIF fund to biking, walking, and transit related. So, if you take a look at the study, that's where the money is going to go. Next. A question was asked regarding the impact to pipeline projects. As Michaela mentioned, the decision is that there is going to be no fee. The fee is not going to go into effect before July 1. So the projects that are in the pipeline or submit their application before July 1 are not going to be subject to the TIF. We received a comment from AC Transit regarding including some more of transit-related projects in the Nexus study. We reached out to our consultant, identified those projects, and they included those and recalculated the fee to include those projects that were transit-oriented. Next. At the developer feedback on the 4th of March, we received comments, as I mentioned, regarding the outreach. They thought that we have to do better in terms of personal outreach to the developer community, and that is exactly what we did. And we decided to have a second developer feedback opportunity, and we did that. And then there was a comment regarding grandfathering for the applications that are in the pipeline, and that is exactly what is being proposed. Next. A comment was made that, regarding the cities that we have selected for comparison. As Michaela mentioned, we wanted to select cities that are in Alameda County, the cities that are in East Bay and South Bay. Maybe they are comparable in size to Hayward and or similarly situated. We included the city of Cupertino, and let me explain, because size-wise and otherwise that is not comparable to Hayward. We included Cupertino because they had the latest version of a TIF fee, and we wanted to know what that is and how we compare to their fee. That was the reason for that. Next. At the last stakeholder meeting, as I mentioned, the second one that we had, there was a comment from a representative of BIA that why didn't we have a fee for multifamily or rental while we had it for single family? Again, the explanation is that there is significant demand for single family, unlike multifamily. Prices have been going up in single family homes even over the past couple of years. but that is not the case in rents for multifamily, and their feasibility is lower, much lower. So, and we are recommending the fee for single family to be set at 70% reduction from the maximum allowable. So we are considering the market for single family as well. There was a comment regarding the impact to LTA. How is local transportation analysis going to be impacted? Why, if fee goes into effect? The response was that the fee schedule for TIF will be available upfront so that developers have access to that. And that, as I mentioned before, the TIF is going to replace the traffic analysis that are currently required to be done for developers related to system-wide improvements requirements. So if it is an intersection or a roadway that is already included in TIF, it will not be included in a requirement for a particular development. Local project-specific improvements are not going to be included. But if they are not included, those studies are not included in the Nexus study, they may still be required. I say may because there are circumstances that even then an LTA is not going to be required. And we are going to prepare all of this information, put it online, and make it accessible to everyone to explain the process. Next. A great question was asked regarding the relationship to CEQA, which requires vehicles mile traveled or VMT. The response is that TIF does not, affect the VTM analysis that may be required under CEQA for some projects. TIF is outside of CEQA. If a project requires a VMT analysis, whether or not we have TIF, it will not affect that. A question was asked regarding impact on businesses. As Michaela mentioned, we are temporarily waiving the fee for retail and office, restaurants and such at this time. And even general industrial and e-commerce, they are going to see a 30% reduction in the fees that are allowable under the law per the Nexus study that we have done. So even then, we are cognizant of the impact that it might have on development in the city. Next. So we have developed an LTA process flowchart that I don't think is included in this presentation to you this evening, but it basically outlines the process to determine whether or not an LTA is going to be required. There are questions to determine the threshold, whether or not even the project is exempt from TIF, such as multifamily, and if they are subject to a TIF, there will be a table about what is the exposure. There will be VMT map zones. If they are in, let's say, the green color zone, a project is there, VMT is not going to be applicable to them, and there will be some other guidelines related to that. And so on. We are going to have a frequently asked questions facts document, as I mentioned, to answer the questions that are typically asked and provide for links to other resources for the developers and other interested parties. Next. So with your comments tonight, we are going to then take this project to a work session, a council work session on Tuesday, May 3rd. And after that, we are going to have a public hearing scheduled right now, scheduled for May 17th. And then there will be some weeks before the new ordinance goes into effect. And TIF is going to be in effect, if approved, beginning July 1 of 2022. Next. So with that, staff recommendation is that the Planning Commission review and provide feedback on the proposed TIF. And we are providing this table here again for your reference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mary. Really appreciate the presentation. And also, Ms. Jellicoe, thank you so much. We will go ahead and move on to public comment first before questions, just because I want to see if there's anybody that wants to chime in on this work session item from the public. We'll have one attendee. Ms. Chan, could you please moderate that and see if our attendee would like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. If you wish to speak and you're using the Zoom application, please click the raise hand function and your name will be called. When called to speak, please begin by stating your name and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Right, Chair? Nobody has raised their hand.
Thank you, Ms. Chan. Seeing no speakers for public comment on this item, we're going to move into commissioner questions and comments together. I'm going to flip the script on this one, and I'm going to start us off this time because I feel like it. So I participated in some of the work sessions for the public meetings that have happened. I participated. I gave some of my feedback. I think I saw some of the feedback. There might have been other people that shared similar feedback to mine, but I definitely saw some of the comments that I made in there. Mine specifically, I'm interested in the single family housing fee reduction. And, my understanding that another component of the reason for a fee reduction, aside from the category of marginal to that specific product, we have been reviewing the affordable housing ordinance and considering additional or increasing fees and adding an additional fee to certain large plot single family homes. At least that's something that I've been very interested in. I'm not exactly sure where that leaves us in City Council with those particular suggestions. So, for me, I'd like to say that, I appreciate that we still have a fee on the single family home developments. My personal opinion about, what construction is going to occur in the single family home market is really going to come from people who have resources to do so. And most of those are going to be not single family home infill development in, sort of flat land of the city of Hayward. It's going to be in the hills where the land is a lot more abundant for single family home development. So I believe that the reduction in fees is not necessary. I think, we can consider, the weight of our affordable housing fees versus, fees on single family home development. But I think, again, for large lot single family homes, typically I would say, maybe making the cutoff 2,500 to 5,000 square feet. Those are all homes that are, we're expecting they're adding, 5-6 cars a house. What we've seen in just the recent past and some of the projects, with some of these 5-bedroom homes, et cetera. So, I think that it would be reasonable to increase the fees on single family homes above those certain lot sizes I just named. So that's my only comment. If not the maximum fee, because we are considering an affordable housing ordinance fee, I would say, looking at a smaller reduction, maybe just 30% of the maximum applying to those large lots. And I think that would be, it's also to make the point and just kind of be transparent. I'm not exactly sure how much, this isn't going to be raising a whole ton of money from single family home developments. So, it's ultimately, fairly small potatoes considering our high, the high number of expenditures we have in the traffic impact fund, So you know, I'm obviously I'm not super. I'm not gonna, you know, go to the mattresses for this issue, but I do feel like we could be a little bit more assertive in the fees we are mandating in this area. So with that, I will end my comment and I'll pass it on to who I see first in the queue, and that is Commissioner Goldstein.
Thank you, Chair Okenda. I'm inclined to agree with Chair Okenda on that idea that maybe for single-family home designations, it ought not to be the same fee. And for exactly the reasons that he expressed. If you've got a 5,000 square foot lot, as some of the Hill properties are, that have a 4,000 square foot home on it with 6 bedrooms, 5 or 6 bedrooms, I think that's going to have a substantially different impact than a 5,000 square foot lot in the flats area with a 1,800 or 2,000 square foot home. And so I think there should be some allowance, some sliding scale mechanism, talking about maybe the number of bedrooms, and then perhaps some exclusion for ADUs. And, you know, specifically, probably can't do this, but if there were some way to say that the ADUs actually had to be available for rent or actually being rented, that would be an extra bonus. Not really sure how we would implement something like that. So I just throw that out there as a potential idea. You know, clearly we do need to incentivize homes, but I don't think giving discounts to the wealthiest people in our community is necessary. I don't think there's going to be any negative impact one way or the other. And we do need to fund our streets and roads. And so that kind of leads me to this other question, and that is whether or not the traffic impact fees would, if they'd been in place for a while before Amazon decided that they wanted to convert their data center to a trucking facility, a delivery facility, would that have solved that contentious argument over the $4.5 million traffic light reworking that the city was asking for? Or you remember that conversation a few months ago?
Yes, I remember that, Commissioner Goldstein. What I wanted to first comment was in response to the comment that Chairman Okenda made and you made regarding single family, and just mention that in the category of single family, we also have townhomes. So townhouses are included in single family. So when we are thinking about single family, we should include those as well. And as I mentioned, we are going to take a look at the performance of our TIF and single family and developments and what has come in, how much money has been generated when we look at the TIF ordinance in 3 years' time. That is exactly the reason that community attributes was hired to take a look at the financial feasibility and make a recommendation. To my knowledge, there are not many cities that have set their TIF at the maximum allowable. They are always below that. This is the number that we have selected based on the recommendation from the experts, and we are going to take a look. I am definitely going to convey your comments to City Council during their work session and public hearing, but I wanted to mention that. Regarding the warehouse on West Winton Avenue, you're right, it was contentious. I think part of it is because that came at the end of the process. I know you recall that they have their warehouse already constructed, 507,000 square feet. And then they were here talking about wanting to use it for a different use. Right. And when they heard about the amount, they balked at that. They did not have that in their budget. Now, if that development came in today, they will have access to the numbers before anything else. They see that every 1,000 square foot will have a fee of a certain amount. they can do the math and come up with a figure of about $3 million, maybe a little bit less than that for the TIF. Then there is for them, for a development of that nature and that size, there is a local transportation analysis that they have to do to see what their impacts are. And a certain amount is going to be generated there. So I would say that the amount would be comparable, but the certainty and the streamlining that this process is going to bring to that development is what was not present at that time.
So you're feeling then, sorry to dredge up history, but I think we learn from history and then prepare for the future. And so I'm asking, in your opinion, the fact that they were asked to pay those fees, since it came at the end, it was the shock value that you think offended them more than the price?
My opinion is yes, because when you look at the cost of the land for that development, that was a 20-acre piece of property. The cost of development of the 507,000 square foot warehouse, the amount of improvement, the amount of fee or improvements that we were asking at that time wasn't a huge percentage point, but it came towards the end of the process, and that contributed to the reaction that we had.
Okay, good. So I think in summary to that topic, we can assume, perhaps with some reasonable certainty, that the TIF would actually make it easier for companies that are coming to town, developers that are looking to develop in Hayward. That certainly will give them some comfort. Even though the fees aren't necessarily going to change, we'll still be able to raise the money we need for traffic improvements, but the comfort level of that certainty should help. And is that also the finding, Ms. Jellicoe? Is that something that your organization feels pretty certain about as well?
I'd say that we're not necessarily as involved on the implementation side, and we don't do the LTA side of things. So we don't do local transportation analysis, but in my experience, having that number up front would allow them to put it into their own feasibility calculations before they ever even submit a permit. So they know what that capital stack they need is ahead of time, rather than having that question mark when they submit the permit.
Right. Very good. Yeah, that's critical. I'm aware of that. For any developer, they want to know how it's going to pencil out before they commit to anything. So that's good. And then one last question for me, and that is that considering that projects that are in the pipeline already are grandfathered, is there any possible benefit for some developers to switch? I mean, is there any potential benefit for a developer that's currently in the pipeline to go with the TIF program versus the grandfathered LTA?
That's a great question. That if they elect to be covered under TIF, can they be covered under TIF? You're asking, even if their application was submitted before July 1.
Right.
That's a question that we'll be discussing with the city attorney's office to see if that is going to be permissible and feasible. My answer is that probably yes, but we will have to consult with the city attorney's office.
Okay, very good.
And just if I can chime in really quickly, I've seen other TIF ordinances in other jurisdictions, and they do have provisions where projects that basically are going to vest before the TIF ordinance comes into effect, they can agree. You could have it as a condition of approval for that project where they would agree to pay the TIF rate that would be coming in, after they've vested. So that's certainly an option that we can explore. I've seen it in other jurisdictions.
Okay, good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Goldstein, and Senior Assistant City Attorney. It sounded like you had a hungry cat there. I please, fellow commissioners, forgive my transgression on our tradition, but I have a follow-up question to what Mr. Ameri answer you gave to Commissioner Goldstein's question. And my question, I guess I'll ask of Ms. Jellicoe, in the analysis for the feasibility of single-family developments, Mr. Mary said that the townhomes were factored into, basically included in the analysis of that finding of marginal feasibility with other single-family home developments. My personal opinion in this matter would be to separate those and reduce the fee for the townhomes and not the detached single-family homes. What, if any, analysis was done on that kind of distinction in your work?
We actually looked at townhome development specifically in the feasibility modeling. So our sample was looking at townhomes specifically based on just that being sort of a representative type of single family development. The challenge with going back and separating out the two different types of single family development isn't in the feasibility modeling. Ultimately, it goes all the way back to the Nexus study. So the Nexus study has a single category for single family development, both attached and detached. So it includes a very, very broad range of single family development. So we would need to go back and probably have some conversations with the city attorney's office, because you get into some challenges if you separate them without having the Nexus study showing a difference in impact between different types of single family development. You have to be careful about separating them if that Nexus study isn't showing that. So that's why we just looked at, the one, sort of representative type. It may be possible to do different reductions for different types of single family development, but it just becomes a little bit more challenging for the city because it's harder to go back to that Nexus study and say, here's the nexus between why we've chosen to apply different rates to different types of single family development when your study only shows the one rate. So we typically recommend, so that you can be on very firm footing, that you stick with a single reduction type within, based on the categories that you have in your study. In my experience, it is true that larger homes do tend to have more impact, but it just all comes back to how the Nexus study was put together. And it may have to do, I didn't develop the Nexus study, so I'm not sure, what kind of data limitations might have been in place in limiting how much you can break out housing within each type to determine the difference in impact.
Thank you, Mr. Jellicoe. I'm seeing Ms. Sola.
Yes. So I'm the senior transportation engineer, and I just wanted to add that because of Senate Bill 330, which is the Housing Crisis Act of 2019, as well as Senate Bill 35, which streamlines affordable housing, we wanted to make sure not to disincentivize housing in general, especially since some detached, like single family homes, can also be affordable housing. So we wanted to make sure that we still, gave housing a break so we could align more with those Senate bills.
Thank you for that information.
In addition, I just wanted to add that the fee for single family home is very much aligned with the fee that other jurisdictions in the East Bay are charging for single family homes. We didn't want to be way in excess of what others are charging.
Okay, I appreciate all that. Those are helpful answers. I think my position ultimately is but I still do think there is a distinction, and I appreciate the difficulty with breaking that distinction up. I would say that, because the maximum fee would apply to all of those single family homes as a sort of baseline, that wouldn't change. So you're still treating them similarly, just the fee reduction based on, different fee reductions based on, what are certain other assumptions I understand complicates the matters. So thank you for that clarity. And with that, I'll step back now, and Commissioner Lowe, please take it away.
Thank you, Chair. So I have a few questions. One of my questions is, one of the things you said was that there was a strong regional demand as related to e-commerce and general industrial. So I still don't feel like I have a real handle on why we are asking or agreeing to a 30% reduction as opposed to 5 or 10 or 15 or 20% reduction. Can you explain a little bit more?
Is that a question for Michaela?
Yes.
Sure. So I think that we took into account both the feasibility as well as your, regional comparisons. So, wanting to remain competitive within those comparison jurisdictions by sort of landing near the middle while recognizing that there is strong demand, but you are competing with those same jurisdictions for these similar types of uses. So the 30% reduction sort of lands you still in that, nice middle of the pack rate, while also not necessarily challenging development through the fee alone.
Thank you. And are warehouses under general industrial or e-commerce?
If they are typical warehouses, they are under general industrial. If they are distribution warehouses, they are under distribution e-commerce.
So how does the annual automatic construction inflation index work? I read it, I listened to you, I still don't understand. Sorry about that.
So there is the regular inflation in, let's say, producer prices or consumer prices. And then there is construction index that goes up from year to year. And they are not necessarily, the same. So construction sometimes goes up higher than consumer prices or vice versa. Because this fee is for construction, it is best to connect it to the construction index, and that is what we are recommending.
So it's connected to the construction index, but
so there is.
But we aren't going to double check to see if the fee is still the correct fee for another 3 years, though, right?
No, we are going to change that on an annual basis. So if a fee is $100 in 1 year, and then the construction index is 4%, the fee in the following year is going to go to $104, and then later to $108 maybe. And then the third year, we are going to do a comprehensive, evaluation and look at the fee and see if it has to stay at 108 or go down or go up, regardless of what the construction index is at that time.
Oh, I see. All right. So it's just a more in-depth deep dive into what's whether or not the fees are still appropriate at that time.
Correct.
Got it. So can additional fees be automatically imposed if there's an impact study for a specific project that shows the impact is worse than was generally anticipated? under the TIF?
So when the TIF goes into effect, and if there is a development that is subject to a local transportation analysis, and that shows that there are other impacts that are not covered under the TIF projects and Nexus study, then those impacts will have to be mitigated. So there may be more cost to a development that generates those kinds of impacts.
And so that would seem then that our goal of making sure that these fees are transparent and consistent and well-known, doesn't that go away a little bit?
The example that I gave you is few and far in between. Most projects are not going to be subject to an LTA, and they don't have very project-specific impacts, but there may be a distribution warehouse that affects an intersection or a roadway that is not included in the Nexus study. They still be responsible for that under their LTA. But that LTA doesn't apply, the LTA requirement doesn't apply to a vast majority of other projects that are either smaller in size or that they don't have those kinds of impacts.
So if you have a project or a new development and they're requesting a zone change, for example, would that necessitate a specific study?
So I don't know if either the city attorney's office or development services, our planning director, would want to take that question.
Apparently not.
No, they would.
Just to address that, so the definition of a development and development project is in the Mitigation Fee Act. And it's a fairly broad definition, and it encompasses not just construction, but encompasses changes in use that would increase density or increase the intensity of something. So it's certainly possible that a zoning change request that could result in increased density, increased intensity of use would be considered a development project subject to a TIF.
And I'm sorry to keep bothering you, but I do want to make sure I understand. Is it also possible, it might be subject to a TIF, but would it also be subject to any additional fees or, let's see, I thought I wrote down. So one of the things that I was reading is it said that after doing a specific study, it could be that instead of a monetary fee, it could just change the site frontage or site improvements, which there might be additional requirements for developers as it relates to the frontage or site improvements. Does that only kick in, that portion of what I read, does that only kick in if there is a zoning change, or can that happen just with any specific TIF report?
So Commissioner Lowe, I can take that. I'm Stephen Chang, Transportation Planner of Public Works. So the TIF doesn't change the site plan review process. Mm-hmm. When developers come in for an application, they will still be subject to site plan review. So if staff identify a specific transportation-related issue that is not covered by the TIF, then we as staff can ask for the developer to mitigate the impact. So a good example is if a project results in a need for a traffic signal at the intersection of their driveway, and that intersection is not included in the TIF list, then the development would then be responsible for mitigating that impact by installing the traffic signal. And
that
it also
would be a
does.
condition of approval?
I'm sorry. What was that?
Would that be a condition of approval?
Yes, that would be included as a condition of approval, and it would be subject to the LTA because we would need the data from the LTA to determine the appropriate signal timing and number of lanes and et cetera. And it also, the TIF would not also address anything that's related to public safety. So if there's a public safety issue, then staff will also can ask for improvements related to that as well.
Thank you. All right, that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Amazing questions. Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you. And thank you for putting this together. I'm really, really excited. I think a TIF is a great approach. I think it makes Hayward a much more attractive place for developers to come because it definitely eases entry into the marketplace and an understanding the fee structure that's here. I just have one follow-up question for Mr. Chang in the example he just provided. So in your example, if a traffic signal is included in the TIF, and if the development completes the traffic signal and associated infrastructure associated with that, would the development or the developer get credit back and they wouldn't have to pay the full TIF fee? Would they get credit for the traffic signal construction?
So just to clarify, I just want to clarify and make sure I'm understanding what you're asking. So you're saying that if a development comes in and they pay for the traffic signal, that if they would be credited for the amount that was paid by other developments into the...
Exactly. If a developer for some reason did some sort of public improvement that was illustrated in the Nexus study, they made those full improvements and paid for those full improvements, would that value be credited back to them and the TIF be discounted by that value?
I think this is a question that's better suited for the city attorney. However, just to clarify, under my example, the intersection would have not been included in the TIF list.
Okay, thank you. So I apologize for misunderstanding.
No worries.
Sure. And I'll just add that there are, in my review of other TIF ordinances from other jurisdictions, they do provide for credit if a developer does, construct improvements. There are other jurisdictions that have provided that in their TIF. So that's something we'll discuss with staff and explore further. I don't know that it's currently in the draft that we're working with, but that it's not an uncommon feature of these types of programs.
Right.
I would strongly encourage that, and I strongly encourage it to be very well written, because that can, I think we all know, can become a very controversial issue with developments. And the second thing is, I wouldn't be supportive of adjusting the fees associated with single-family housing. And I would just make the observation that when we talk about a townhome, we can think of a townhome as something, but there's also a lot of single-family homes that are being developed today that are developed as PUDs on very small lots with very small setbacks, and they perform very similar to townhomes. So I would be concerned that trying to create a distinction amongst all these different single-family uses would become very complicated and very difficult for the city to administer. So I think that and I also would suspect that the number of large homes being constructed in Hayward is very small. So the fee that's generated by that is probably marginal as compared to the other uses, and probably the administrative costs would far exceed that. So thank you. I appreciate everybody's hard work at this, and I'm so excited to see this move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. And as always, really appreciate your comments. I'm persuaded. So thank you for sharing your views on that. Commissioner Bonilla.
Thank you. Everyone's asked such great questions. It's been a very great opportunity to kind of get deeper into this whole thing. So the assistant city attorney had mentioned his review of other TIF ordinances. I was really kind of tracking with what Chair Okenda was recommending in terms of just looking at how the fee for single family homes might be, I guess, divided or, separated out by different types of single family uses. Have you seen any of that in any of the ordinances that you've reviewed?
Is this question for me?
Yeah. That you were doing some other reviews of TIF ordinances.
Right. On that specific issue, I don't recall that I've seen that. I've been looking at other components of it, so I can't really say one way or another if they have or not.
Okay. I just thought it was a pretty cool idea, but then Commissioner Stevens brought up some really good points as well. So overall, I'm supportive of what's being proposed here. I appreciate the simplified process, and I also appreciate that we were relatively conservative in the amount of fees that we were, looking at to make sure that we weren't disincentivizing any type of development in the city. So I really, really appreciate that. I think it's important. I also appreciate the comparison of other fees in other jurisdictions because it gives me an appreciation for where we're at and Hayward and the housing need that we have, kind of staying beneath other cities like Fremont and Union City, I think is just a great way of incentivizing that kind of development in our city. I also appreciated the questions and comments from Commissioner Lowe because I was a little surprised that we thought e-commerce was such a promising, or life sciences was such a promising thing to bring into Hayward, because I feel like we're struggling bringing in those type of organizations. But if the research shows that, the demand is there and it's possible, I'm all for it. So I also appreciate, the slides that were put together because it helped me really understand this recommendation a lot more, which I'm supportive of. I'm also glad to see how responsive the city was to feedback that we received, including completing additional stakeholder feedback meetings to really make sure that we were listening and understanding the needs of the community. Maybe I missed this, but we're doing some temporary fee waiving for office and retail. How temporary are those fees going to, how long is that temporary waiver for?
I would say initially that is 3 years. So when we look at the fees in 3 years' time, we are going to look at that temporary pause and see if we need to do something.
Got it. Thank you so much. Those are all of my comments this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, commissioners. Commissioner Bonilla, I really appreciate that. So I think there you have it, staff. Now run free.
Great comments. Very much appreciate your comments and insights, and we are going to convey them to the City Council during the work session and beyond.
Thank you so much, Mr. Marriott. Commissioner Lowe, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I just wanted to say I really did appreciate all of the hard work that everybody put into this. I thought it was extremely thorough, even though it sounded like I didn't know what I read. I did read it all, and I just want clarification on some things, but I do want to make sure it's clear from my personal opinion is I do think if we are saying that there's a strong regional demand for general industrial and e-commerce and distribution, I do think that we should increase those fees. So I do want to bring that to staff's attention, but really great job on the presentation. I really appreciate everyone's very patient and thoughtful answers to my 3,000 questions as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Commissioner Lowe. All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up on that agenda item, if I'm not mistaken. And now we can move on to our, favorite one, the minutes.
Thank you very much.
I make a motion. May I make a motion?
Yeah, sure.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I will second Commissioner Lowe's motion.
You get that, Ms. Chan?
Thank you, Chair. All right. So, Commissioner Bonilla.
Yes, I approve.
Commissioner Goldstein,
Approved.
Commissioner Lowe,
Yes, approve.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes.
Chair Okenda.
Yes.
Very good.
And I'll say again and emphatically, great job on the minutes. I read those and they were a beast of paragraphs for all
They
the
were a
comments.
beast.
They were beast paragraphs.
Thank you.
Thank you for your great work on that. And again, thank you, Mr. and Mary, for both presentations and all the great work that you're doing for the city. Yeah, we value you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Okay. Well, we have final staff announcements and commissioner announcements. Mr. Lokirko?
Lokirko, you got it right the first time. Just a couple of quick announcements for the Planning Commission. Good evening, everyone. This is a friendly reminder that we are having the Housing Balancing Act as part of our housing plan update, which is currently available online. So those of you that are interested in participating in that visual simulation on housing development in Hayward can go to the website. There's also some really great information about the Climate Action Plan update and the environmental justice element that's also being prepared as part of that. The website is www.haywardhousingandclimateupdate.com. It's a very long word, but it is all one word. So once again, haywardhousingandclimateupdate.com. A little plug for our a lot of the big initiatives that we're working on right now. So please go there and participate. I also wanted to communicate to the Commission that our first hybrid meeting for the Planning Commission is scheduled for May 12th. Many of you probably, thank you for responding for those that are able to participate in person. We will be doing some Commissioner Light training for those that have never had the experience to be in our council chambers. It's actually a really wonderful experience, and I'm looking forward to seeing many of you in person. And then the last item is just our Planning Commission meeting right now scheduled for April 28th. We do not have anything on the agenda as of now, so unless there's a last minute work session, most likely that meeting will get canceled. So you will have one evening back to yourself again. But anyway, those are my report outs for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lokirko. I have one announcement. I did the Balancing Act. I don't know if I'm the only person who's done it. I mean, not on the commission. I mean, I know all of you have definitely done it, but I'm talking about in the community generally. I felt like it was such an interesting experience to try to, in very broad terms, think about where housing is going to fall in different neighborhoods of our community, thinking about density, et cetera. So I just recommend everybody at least take a look at that tool and see what you think. And Commissioner Bonilla.
I just have two quick questions. Jeremy, first is, are we still having a joint council meeting next Tuesday or a joint work session or something?
No, sir, we are not. That meeting had been canceled in lieu of some additional staff preparation for the housing.
Thanks, Jeremy. And then, not like it's going to matter, one way or another of my decision to show up in person, but are they wearing masks in the chambers?
That's a good question. I think more insight. Denise, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or if you've received any guidance from the city clerk's office. I think that will probably all be disclosed and discussed unless, Denise, you have any information on that right now.
No, at this time, I do not.
Okay.
Thanks.
Alrighty. Seeing no other announcements, I think that's all, folks.
Thank you.
That's all, folks.
Thank you. Commissioner Bonilla?
Yes.
I'm going to call you after the meeting ends, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Okay, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Later. Have a good evening.
Night.